Hi, welcome to Unit 4 of Vocational Math. This is the unit on percents, and there's quite a bit of different topics in this part for you guys to master. So I'm breaking the PowerPoints into at least 2 sections, if not 3. We'll see how long each piece is. So let's start. First of all, let's start by comparing percents to what we already know about fractions and decimals. And fractions, decimals, and percents are all connected, and you can see by this graphic, this triangle, that this actually appears in the textbook, how the three are connected together. So you can peruse this graphic on your own time. What I really want to talk about is the percents piece of this, and the word percent, you can literally translate it into per 100 or divided by 100. So this is really important to remember whenever you see percents. For example, if you look over here on the right hand side of the screen, when I say 50%, what I mean is 50 divided by 100. So 50% can be written as a fraction or as a decimal. All I do is I take this division and I convert it to a fraction. I know 50 divided by 100 is the same as the fraction 50 over 100 because the fraction bar is division. And then I can reduce that fraction. 50 over 100 is 1/2, because 50 divided by 50 is 1 and 100 divided by 50 is 2. That's how I get from 50 over 100 to 1/2. So 50% is the same as 1/2. 50% is also, again, 50 divided by 100, so I could write that as a decimal. 50 divided by 100 is the same as 0.5. So 50% is equal to 1/2 is equal to 0.5. And if you follow the instructions on this triangle, the instructions on the outside of the triangle go with the arrows on the outside. So if I'm going from fractions to percents, I follow this rule. If I'm going from fractions to decimals, I follow the rule out here. If I'm going from percents to decimals, I follow this rule in here. And so to make it a little less confusing, I have it written out separately on the next slide. So let's convert between fractions, percents, and decimals. And we're going to start out being given different things. Now, we've already done fractions to decimals, decimals to fractions. Those were previous units. So today we're going to focus on percents. So if I'm given a decimal and I want to write it as a percent, what you do is you multiply the decimal by 100. Now, multiplying the decimal by 100 is the same as moving the decimal point 2 places to the right. So if I, for instance, want to turn 0.72 into a percent, I move the decimal point 2 places to the right, because 0.72 times 100 is 72. So I take 72 and then I tack a percent sign onto the end of it. So 0.72 is the same as 72%. 0.64, again, I move the decimal point 2 places to the right. That's the same as 67.4%. So move the decimal point 2 places to the right, tack on a percent sign. 6.32, I move it 2 places to the right. I get 632%. So if I have a decimal that's a whole number and I'm converting it to a percent, I'm going to get a percent that's bigger than 100. So if I look at the number 8, there isn't even a decimal point there. If there's no decimal point, you have to put one in. So if I'm talking about 8, I'm talking about 8 point what? 8.0. I can put as many zeros as I want after the decimal point. So I put in my decimal point, I move it 2 places to the right, so 8 as a percent is 800%. That's going from a decimal to a percent. Now let's go the other way. Go from a percent to a decimal. Now, the opposite of multiplication is division. So when I go from a decimal to a percent, I multiply. When I go from a percent to a decimal, I divide. I divide by 100. Remember, percent literally means divided by 100. Now, dividing by 100 is the same thing as moving the decimal point 2 places to the left. So again, there's no decimal point here. If I want to change 59% to a decimal, first I have to add in the decimal point, and I add it in on the end. So it's 59.59%. 0%, and then I move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So 59% is the same as 0.59. 125%. I put the decimal point on the end. I move it 2 places to the left. That's the same as 1.25. Remember, if I have something that's over 100%, I should get a whole number when I convert it to a decimal. Here I have 4.3%. I move this 2 places to the left, and I have to add an extra 0 in over here. So 4.3% is the same as 0.043. And then the last one here, I have a mixed number. I have 37.5%. Now, in order to convert this to a decimal, I first need to change the 1/2 to a decimal. So you can type it in your calculator, or you can remember that a half is the same as 0.5. So 37.5 is 37.5. So change it to a decimal first, and now that I have my decimal, I move the decimal 2 places to the left, and so 37.5% is the same as 0.375. Now let's convert between fractions and percents. So this is our final kind of conversion. If I'm given a fraction, changing it to a percent. Now there's 2 ways to do it, and I think, in my opinion, the first way is the easiest way, but you need to do the one that works the best for you. I brought my calculator up because we need the calculator for this part. So the first method, if I'm given a fraction and I want to change it to a percent, is to first change it to a decimal. So 2/5 as a decimal is 2 divided by 5. Now remember, this calculator gives you the answer as a fraction. I just hit the SD button and it tells me it's 0.4. So 2/5 is the same as 0.4. And then I know if I want to change that to a percent, I need to move the decimal 2 places to the right, or I need to take my decimal and multiply it by 100, and that gives me my percent. So 2/5 as a percent is 40%. Let's try the next one. 2/7. First, I convert it to a decimal. So I say 2 divided by 7 equals, as a decimal, 2.28574. Lots of numbers. Now notice I do tell you to round, but I tell you to round to the nearest 1/10 of a percent. 1/10 of a percent. That means I want to change it to a percent first. So 2/7 as a decimal is 0.2. I'm just going to write down a bunch of the numbers. 8, 5, 7, 1, 4, and then I'm going to move the decimal point 2 places to the right. So that's 28 point. Now I need to just 1 place after the decimal. So I need to know if I round the 5 up or if I leave it the same. So I look at the 7. Since 7 is bigger than this 5 or bigger, I know I round up. So it's 28.6%. So first change it to the percent and then round to that decimal point that's in your percentage. Okay, the last one we're going to do is another mixed number, 1 and 1/9. And so again, we want to convert that to a decimal. So we're going to take our mixed number and say 1 and 1/9 is the same as 10/9. As a decimal, that's 1.111111111. Lots of ones. So that equals 1.1111. And then I move the decimal point 2 places to the right. And so as a percent, it's 111 point. And then I just want 1 place after the decimal. Do I round this up or down? I round it down since the 1 is less than 5. So this one crosses off, and I just leave the 1 alone. So this is 111.1%. Now the second method is to multiply your fraction by 100%. So I would just take 4/5 and I would say times 100%. So I go over here and I take 4 divided by 5. That's my 4/5. And I say times 100%, 80. Now, if you were doing the calculations, it would be 400 over 5, and that's the same as 80. All right, let's do this one. The second one's a little more complicated. 2 and 4/15. So, again, we'll type in a mixed number. 2 and 4/15. And that is 34 over 15. I multiply that by 100, and I get, as a decimal, 226.66. Now, this is already a percent, so I want to round it to the nearest tenth of a percent again. So I'll say 226, and then I have to decide if I'm going to round up or down. And since this 6 is bigger than, it's 5 or bigger, I'm going to round up. So it's 226.7%. Don't forget the percent sign. Over here, this is bad. I forgot the percent sign. You always want to make sure if you're converting to a percent or if you're writing a percent that you include that percent sign in your answer. Okay, let me get rid of my calculator and then we'll do this page. So we just finished converting between fractions, decimals, and percents, and that's an important skill to be able to solve any sort of percent problem. But now let's move on to solving percent word problems, and we're going to start out with extremely simple ones that just help us figure out how to set up writing something that we can solve. So all percent problems have 3 pieces. They have the percent, they have the part, and they have the whole. Another way you can think of the whole is the total or total amount. And the most important thing to do when you're solving a percent problem is to figure out what part is missing. Which piece is missing? Is the part missing? Is the whole missing? Or is the percent missing? So here's an example over here that I have. And I color-coded everything to try and help you see a little bit better what's going on. So if I ask you, what is 10% of 200? So this question has a part, a percent, and a whole. So anytime you see the word what, that is your missing piece. And so if I'm going to translate this into math, I would replace that what with a question mark or a box, or if you want, you can use a variable. You can use the letter X. But I'm going to show it in these slides with a red question mark when I do this. So what is always the part that's missing, the piece that's missing. The word is means equals. And then the word of, when it's all by itself, of means multiply. Now, in a percent word problem, it is always of the whole. So I know when I read this problem that 200 is my whole, my total amount. 10%, well, that's obvious because I have my little percent sign there. That's my percent. So the piece that's missing on this example is the part. The part is the piece that's missing. You'll see when you do the homework that I frequently tell you, I give you a hint. I say, as a hint, the part is what's missing. And that's to help you set things up. Because I want to translate this to math. So when I translate this question to math, what is 10% of 100? I say, what, question mark, is equals 10%. Now notice, I have to convert the percent to a decimal. You must write the percent as a decimal when we convert like this. So it's assumed that you're going to automatically convert it to a decimal before you put it into this kind of calculation. So what is 10%? Question mark equals 0.1 of 200 times 200. Part equals percent times the whole. Okay, so now if we do this calculation in our calculators, let us do that quickly. Okay, so I want to do 0.1 times 200, and that equals 20. So 10% of 200 is 20. 20 is 10% of 200. 20. Okay, because I just did 0.1 times 200, which gives me 20. All right, so let's figure it out. Let's write these things down. Here's some examples. I'm missing the part. So remember, it's always, the percent is always, it's easy to figure out the percent because you got the little percent sign or you have the word percent. Of is always multiplication. Is always equals. And it's always of the whole. Here's the whole. So 10% of 200 is what? That means I am missing the part again. So I'll say 10% as a decimal is 0.1 times 200 equals what? Okay, so we just did that. This is also the one we did on the other page. What is 10% of 200? Okay. What is my question mark? Is my equal sign. 10% is 0.1. Of is multiplication. So that's the missing part. And I know question mark equals 20 because we did that calculation. Okay, if I'm missing the whole, so how do I know I'm missing the whole? Because I always know it's of the whole. So if it says of what, then I know that what I'm missing is the whole. So again, I do my translation. 10% as a decimal is 0.1. Of, because remember I moved the decimal point 2 places to the left. Of is multiplication. What is a question mark? Is equals, and 20. So 0.1 times what equals 20? 20% is 10% of what? Okay, again, I'm going to just translate it directly. 20 is 10% of what? And I'm going to show you how to do these calculations on the next slide. The missing percent is another way we can see it, and here we'll do a direct translation. 20 is what percent? What percent? It says I don't know the percent. So 20 is what percent of 200? And then what percent, question mark, of 200 is 20. So these are all different ways that you can see this written, and you can come back and review this slide to help you remember how to set things up. So once we have it set up, how do we do the calculations? Okay, so the missing part I already did. We just pull out our calculator and do it. The missing whole, I want to talk a little bit about algebra first. And so think about it for a second. If I ask you, 50 is 5 times what? 50 is 5 times what? What would you tell me? What's the what? Hopefully you'd say 10. Because you know 5 times 10 is 50. Now, what if I asked you one that you couldn't just figure out in your head? How do we get to that number? Well, this is multiplication. 5 times what? 5 times 10 is 50. If I want to get to this what, this question mark, I do the opposite of multiplication. So I divide. I take my 50, I divide it by 5, and that's where my 10 comes in. So I take the two numbers I have and I divide them. So on the previous slide, I said 20 is 10% of what? I'm missing the whole. I want to know what the whole is. So I need to divide 20 by 10%. 20 divided by 10% is going to give me the whole. And so if we do that on our calculator, 20 divided by 10%, let's do that very quick. So I do 20 divided by 0.1, and I get 200. So the whole in this problem is 200. Okay, and then what happens if we're missing a percent and we have 20 equals a question mark times 200? Now again, I want to know what the question mark is. So I divide by whatever is being multiplied with the question mark. Okay, here I divided by 0.1 because that's what was being multiplied by the question mark. Here, since I'm multiplying 200 with the question mark, that's what I divide by. So I say 20 divided by 200 is going to give me my percent. Now notice that it gives it to me as a fraction or a decimal. So my question mark is 0.1, but I want it to be a percent. So I have to convert this to a percent. So I have to move the decimal 2 places to the right, and add the percent. So question mark is equal to 10%. This is a really common mistake people forget to convert. Okay, let's do just a few more examples with more complicated numbers, and this is the last slide in this section. Okay, I want to know what is 16% of 140. Now, first of all, I need to convert the percent to a decimal. So I'm going to do that first. So I put my decimal point at the end, move it 2 places to the left, and so I know 16% is a decimal is 0.16. And then I translate. I say what? So question mark is 0.16 of 140. So I just need to take 0.16 times 40, and then I'll know what my part is, 140. So as a decimal, $22.40. So my answer to this one, when you're doing dollars, always make sure you go to the nearest penny, $22.40. Okay, missing whole. 27 is 54% of what value? Now again, I have a percent here, so I convert my percent to a decimal. So 54% is 0.54, and then I translate. I say 27 is 54%, 0.54 of, that's multiplication, what value? I don't know. Alright, so since I don't know that one, I say my question mark is 27 divided by the number that I'm multiplying the question mark by. So 27 divided by 0.54. I get 50. So 27 is 54% of 50. 125% is what value of 423. So here's my percent. I convert it to a decimal, 2 places to the left. I get 1.25. So remember, my of is multiplication, so I'm going to write that one out. I have 1.25 times question mark is, that equals 423. Now again, remember, my question mark, since I'm multiplying a number times the question mark, to figure out what the question mark is, I have to divide by that number, 1.25. So I take 423, I divide it by 1.25, and I get 338.4. So 125% of 338.4 is 423. Now since it's $423, I'm going to go to the nearest penny, and I'm going to put units on my answer, $338.40. So, and that was the whole. Now notice that the whole is smaller than the part, and that makes sense because my percent is bigger than 100. Okay, so what percent of $160 is $200? So I don't know my percent. This is my question mark. So I say what percent, question mark, of 160 is 200. So that means I want to take my question mark. In order to figure it out, I'm going to say that's 200 divided by 160. That's a fraction. So again, don't assume that the bigger number is the whole. It's always of the whole. So the 160 is my whole. So I take 200, I divide it by 160. Since the bigger number is on top, I should get something that is bigger than 100%, or bigger than 1. Now, this is 1.25, and this is not a percent yet. Remember, this is a decimal. We have to convert the decimal to a percent. Okay, so I'm going to convert the decimal to a percent. I have, I'm going to continue over here. So I have that my question mark is 1.25, but I want it to be a percent, and there's no percent sign yet, so I have to move my decimal point 2 places to the right and tack on a percent. So my question mark is 125%. And that makes sense because my whole is smaller than my part. Okay, one last one, because this is just really confusing. So this is a good example to do. Again, I don't know my percent. Now of means multiply. So I say, what percent of 1/4 is 3/32? Now again, I have to write this as a division problem. Since I don't know what the question mark is, and that's multiplying by 1/4, I'm going to take 3 divided by 3/32, and I'm going to divide it by 1/4. So let's do that on the calculator. I take my fraction, 3/32, and move the arrow, and then I divide it by 1/4, 1/4, and I get 3/8. Now again, I need to convert this to a percent. So my question mark is 3/8, but now I need to convert this fraction to a percent. So I need to change it to a decimal and then multiply it by 100. Or multiply it by 100 first and then change it to a decimal. So since I'm already here, I'll say times 100, and so I get that 3/8 is, I'm going to say times 100, and now 75/2, I change that to a decimal. That is 37.5%. That's my last example for this. I have a whole nother PowerPoint that goes through all the different types of word problems in this section. I apologize for this being so long. There are a lot of complicated topics in this section, and I hope to answer all of them with these presentations. Good luck. This gets you almost all the way through the material in the very first quiz. The very beginning of the next PowerPoint will get you through being able to do the first quiz all the way through. All right, have fun with percents.